on the cost of it. Those in-person sessions will be in Chicago. And then there will be 4 sessions that are on Zoom together. And I will be serving on that team. So email me if you are interested. I don't think there's anything on the website yet for Academy, but if you're wanting to get information when that comes out, just shoot me an email and I'd be happy. I think it's going to start in August of next year. So friends, our session today is called Pilgrimage, the Place of Our Resurrection. And we'll be sinking deeper into the Celtic concept of pilgrimage, that following the Holy One is a lifelong calling, a calling of radical surrender. And that throughout our lives, we continue to trust ourselves to God's calling in the journey of pilgrimage, that the Spirit will lead us to the place of our resurrection. So it's a lifelong calling, a calling of radical surrender, trusting that the Spirit will lead us to the place of our resurrection. So in the Celtic context, the word used for pilgrimage is peregrinatio. You see the word up there. It does not have a good translation into English. It's a Latin word. And it's best illustrated by a story from the 9th century that Esther de Waal recounts in one of her books. She said, 3 Irish monks took off in a coracle, that's a coracle there in the picture, a round boat, a lot of times made of reeds. They took off from the shore of Ireland in a coracle with no oars. They drifted for 7 days and ended up washing up across the Irish Sea on the shores of Cornwall, which is in England. And they were taken before King Alfred. And he said, "Who are you and what are you doing here?" And the monks said, "We stole away because we wanted for the love of God to be on pilgrimage. We cared not where." So pilgrimage is a journey to a sacred place. It's a spiritual practice. It's not a tourist journey, right? In a pilgrimage, we're tuned in not to itineraries and gift shops, but to the feel of the earth beneath our feet and the sounds of voices raised in prayer and the sight and touch of a high cross that's been standing there for 1,000 years. Elizabeth Canham, one of our Upper Room authors, writes that as pilgrims, we learn to take our time, to lighten our baggage, to listen for the voice of God that speaks not only in Scripture, but also through nature, through our siblings, through the mundaneness of daily life. When our hearts are set on a pilgrim way, we step forward, seeing the holy and the ordinary, and the whole earth filled with the glory of God. Celtic Christians undertook pilgrimage so that they might arrive at the place of their resurrection. Christine Walters Paintner describes peregrinatio this way. Peregrinatio pro Christo is the call to wander for the love of Christ. This wandering is an invitation to let go of our agendas and to discover where God is leading. Those wandering saints set forth without destination and trusted themselves to the currents of divine love. They surrendered themselves completely to the elements of wind and ocean. The river or sea would bring them to places of rest that they had not chosen themselves. The impulse for the journeys was always love. In this profound practice, God becomes both destination and way, companion and guiding force. God is in the call to the journey and the unfolding of the journey, and God greets us at the journey's end. And the goal of this wandering is always to find the place of our resurrection, the place where our gifts can be brought fully to life for the rest of our days. Sometimes a monk will arrive somewhere and think that they have found it, only to be later called by God to move on once more. I just have to think about the appointment system when I think about peregrinatio for us in this room. So there are so many examples of peregrinatio, this kind of pilgrimage from our tradition. The people of Israel led out of Egypt by Moses into the wilderness. We just read about that. They wondered why they were being taken out of that comfortable place in Egypt and brought out there to die of thirst. One of my favorites is always Jonah, because I really related to this person who started out on this pilgrimage and ended up swallowed up by a big fish. And I think about the generations of those of African descent who were kidnapped and transported in slave ships and brought into a new land. Of our beloved St. Harriet Tubman, who heard as a child that God wanted her to be free. Robert Ellsberg writes that it's one of the miracles of Christian history that Africans who were enslaved, having received the false gospel from their Christian slave masters, nevertheless heard in the biblical story a message of life and liberation.